Hey yo, what's good? Welcome back to Annie Recapped. Today we'll be reviewing the anime called Outbreak Company. Before we dive into it, if you want to find more awesome animes to watch from all over the world, do subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell to stay up to date. Now let's get to the show. Shinichi Kano is a homebound hardcore anime and manga fan. Welcome to the club, fam. He applies for a job in a company that lies within his expertise, in the hope to escape his isolated life. The company's manager drugs Shinichi, and when he comes back to his consciousness, he finds himself in an unfamiliar room and notices a girl there in maid's clothes. He gets too excited seeing a real-life maid, but he couldn't understand a word she says, so she hands him a ring that will make him understand her language. She introduces herself as Miusel Foran and is going to serve him from now on. Shinichi was still in confusion when another lady shows up behind him and tells him that he is currently on the outskirts of the Elden Empire, which is a fantasy world full of dragons, elves, and dwarfs. She is an officer from the Japanese government Minori Koganuma and is going to be his bodyguard. She takes him to a mansion where he meets the manager who drugged him, Jinzaburo Matoba. He tells Shinichi about how they find a three-dimensional passage to this world in the middle of the forest. He wants Shinichi to make a way for the Japanese and the residents of this fantasy world to coexist, and for that, his job is to spread the otaku culture of Japan throughout the empire. At first, Shinichi thought the idea was ridiculous and refused to do it, but looking back at his shut-in days, he doesn't have much of a choice. Later, in this room, Miusel brings him tea, and while wondering about this unfamiliar treatment, he notices the pointy ears of Miusel. Miusel gets freaked out about Shinichi finding out about it, but for him, it's just amazing to see a real-life half-elf. He takes her picture and it dawns upon him that people of this world don't know what a cell phone and alphabets are, so he writes her the basic Japanese characters and her name in Japanese. At this moment, a voice comes from behind the door and a lizard-like creature appears and introduces himself as Shinichi's servant, Brooke Darwin. Shinichi dreams of a time when he was a kid and was on a field trip when his PE teacher sat next to him and told him that if he wants to, he can learn something even from the manga. Miusel comes to wake him up and tries to help him change clothes, but he refuses and explains why he's refusing. At that time, Minori shows up and takes him to the castle. She fills him in on the details during the ride and they meet up with the manager at the castle. They both warn him to not say anything that might offend the Empress. But when the Empress permits Shinichi to raise his hand, just one glance at her and he uncontrollably shouts, "She is a little girl!" The Empress, Petralka, is filled with rage and punches the hell out of Shinichi for acting so disrespectfully. Now, since what they feared has already happened, they can only wait and see what the Empress will do. After Shinichi's act of insolence, the Empress is raged and swears to kill him, but the manager explains that Shinichi doesn't mean any disrespect, it's just because of the cultural difference that he said what he said. Even though the issue doesn't escalate any further, but Petralka's knight and her cousin Galius argue about the otaku culture being useless and perhaps harmful, as a hardcore otaku Shinichi couldn't stop himself from talking back and almost made a huge mistake again, but this time Petralka is amused by his response and therefore agrees to provide him any kind of support for his mission. Now that they have the approval, the next thing is how to proceed. The manager leaves the decision to Shinichi because he is not sure how to go about spreading the otaku culture. Shinichi ends up thinking about it all night and couldn't sleep. He finds Miusel studying in the kitchen and decides to help her study every night. He sends out a request for what is needed for the mission, and soon the room turns into his otaku paradise. He asks Brooke and Miusel to check out whatever they want so he can gather research data. During that time, Petralka shows up at his residence and demands Shinichi to read these mangas to her. She orders everyone to leave, but Shinichi holds Miusel back. While reading through a manga, Shinichi starts explaining to Miusel about the Japanese language, making the little Empress feel jealous, so she shoos away Miusel and demands to read the book to her while sitting on his lap. Living in this foreign land is making Shinichi realize the difference. What has been considered abuse in his world is a complete norm here, so he decides to study their culture before he spreads his own. He comes across a training ground where kids are being trained so they can get a job. Shinichi finds out that even Miusel has worked in the military and possesses great offensive magic. He questions some kids while he hands them comics and is faced with the reality that none of these children can read books and do fun stuff in their free time. Later that day, Shinichi was reading manga to Petralka when Miusel came in with some tea. Petralka gets angry at the fact that the servant has dared to interrupt them and tries to throw the snacks on her, but Shinichi stops her. Watching Miusel being insulted pisses him off, but he soon realizes that it's completely normal in their world and tries to deal with it calmly. Taking advantage of the situation, Petralka asks Shinichi to teach her Japanese and about the otaku culture before anyone else so she can decide how useful it is for her nation, and leaves just like that. Later in the night, Shinichi finds Miyusel in the manga room crying over a story about a slave and an overlord. Even though it's normal to cry over a story like that, something doesn't sit right with him and he would like to get to the depth of it. It's been more than a month since Shinichi was brought into this world, and he's been trying to open a school where everyone can get an education about Japanese culture regardless of their race and status. Meanwhile, something is cooking in a dark cave unknown to everyone. The usual imperial study sessions are now conducted with the addition of several noble children, which will be later held in school once it opens. Everyone leaves after the class while Petralka stays behind. She shows her gratitude to Shinichi for being so passionate about his work and not having ulterior motives like many others she encountered. Later in the evening, Miyusel practices her Japanese with Shinichi, and he is surprised by how quickly she is picking up the language. She asks him to take her with him to his world whenever he decides to leave. Shinichi is happy to hear that, but he doesn't want to get his hopes up, thinking that it's because of him that she wants to leave. The construction of the school is almost complete, and Shinichi is looking around the school when Miyusel brings him his lunch, and Petralka appears right after her. She is here to show off her kanji workbook and compete with Miyusel, but Shinichi, defending his maid, angers the young empress, and she starts yelling and dismisses Miyusel from Shinichi's mansion. Just then, some guys in the hood appear and take the empress hostage. They tie them all up and take their rings away. It appears that the device they possess is a destructive fire-type bomb that can blow the whole school into pieces. Shinichi and Minori can no longer understand what they are talking about, so Miyusel translates it for them. They interrogate Shinichi about why he's trying to disrupt their flow of order and give a big lecture about humans being superior and other creatures being under them. They were about to behead Shinichi when Petralka steps in and takes their attention away from him. When they throw him, he lands on Minori's chest. She asks him to get the knife that's a little deep inside. Before they take him off, the knife was in Minori's hand and she is ready for action, but Shinichi asks her to wait 10 more minutes and signals everyone to stay put. The whole army is waiting outside and waiting for a signal from the inside. As soon as the clock hits 7, Shinichi puts up an act of nature call, and on his way there, the alarm for his idol's birthday rings, and he pretends it to be a magical ritual from his world. Using this opportunity, Minori overthrew the terrorists and freed Shinichi's hand. Miyusel follows suit and casts her offensive magic spell, blowing most of them away. The leader still has some fight left in him and tries to launch the bomb, but Shinichi extinguishes it like it was nothing, and Minori topples him down. Before going down, he throws a dagger at Petralka, but Miyusel shields it and takes the dagger to herself. Petralka is surprised by this change of events and calls for a doctor immediately while life is slowly slipping away from her. Shinichi runs to find Miyusel lying on a bed unconscious while Petralka sits next to her crying. The doctor stands sorrowfully, but suddenly Miyusel wakes up with a big yawn, and it turns out Petralka is crying because her pet fish died. Miyusel is okay and will be back home soon. It is finally the first day of school, and Shinichi is somewhat nervous, but once he steps into the class and faces all those student things, it doesn't feel as difficult. Despite their differences and facing difficulties accepting the others' races, they all showed a passion for learning new things. After they learned the basic characters, now it was time for basic terminologies. Shinichi somehow decides to start with weird otaku terms that can't be considered appropriate for minors at all, so Minori switches with him to teach some simple terms. But she is no different from him, and turns out that she's into boys love manga, and somehow thinks that boys love terminology is okay to share with minors. On their way back, Minori gets an intruder alert, so they went to find the intruder. In the bushes, they find a beast girl painting something. They bring her in to question her. She introduces herself as Elbia Hanaiman, a wandering artist, but according to Minori, being able to draw doesn't mean that she's an artist, so the guard takes her under suspicion of spying. It turns out that the neighboring nation often sends spies to keep an eye on the Elden Empire. The punishment for any such spy is to be tortured and eventually executed, but Shinichi doesn't want that to happen, so in his next audience with Empress Petralka, he tries to talk them out so they could spare Elbia's life. He tries to prove that she's not a spy by getting her to play along with him, but his endless winks don't seem to have that much of an effect, because Elbia dug her own grave by indirectly admitting that she is a spy. Then it struck him. Shinichi proposes that they can use Elbia as a tool to deceive the other nation, and that way they can gain political advantage over their enemies. Galeus and the others like this idea, but Petralka's hesitation makes Shinichi question that she might be hesitating because of the race difference. But that wasn't the case. She's just bothered by the fact that he is always surrounded by girls. Listening to Petralka, Miyusel starts to cry, making Petralka worried, but she's only shedding tears of joy that the gap she thought would never vanish is finally closing in, little by little. Petralka allows Shinichi to keep Elbia for now. On hearing that, Elbia spikes up with joy and hugs Shinichi, making his position even worse in front of Petralka. Shinichi is checking Elbia's drawing skills by getting her to draw some anime characters, and so far she's doing great. It appears that werewolves like her control their hunting instincts by distracting themselves with different activities like drawing. At school, now that the basics are done, Shinichi is now moving on to the next main genre of otaku culture, which is the pretty girl games. He explains how the game works and their history and plays one of his favorite games in class. Students are fascinated to see the game play out, and Shinichi is truly satisfied with their reaction. Shinichi finds Miyusel with a huge pile of laundry. It appears that all the laundry in the basket belongs to Elbia. She gets her clothes dirty a lot while she draws, but Miyusel is happy to take care of it since it makes her feel that she is somehow helping Shinichi with his quest. Shinichi is overflown with gratitude and decides to help her out. At dinner, Elbia somehow refuses to eat, so Shinichi went to check on her. When he enters her room, Elbia was growling while drawing a crazy picture of him. She turns to him and kicks him out of the room, but when Shinichi went back, he sees her peeking at him like a hungry wolf, which ultimately makes Shinichi rethink his decision. The school is going smoothly except for the fact that the students are now beginning to argue about their otaku preferences and starting weird clubs. As soon as he gets back home, Miyusel informs him about Petralka summoning him to the mansion. Shinichi notices Elbia at the window staring at him and starts to think that she might have some ulterior motives and might be planning to kill him, and maybe Petralka called him over to discuss that, but it turns out that it was nothing serious. It's just the otaku fever talking everywhere. And it's not just Petralka, but Galeus too. Shinichi couldn't seem to get over the weird feelings about Elbia during his study session with Miyusel. He tries to bring it up, but decides not to. Then he asks Miyusel again if she would follow him back to his world if he ever decides to leave, because things are now different from how they used to be, but Miyusel's thoughts haven't changed one bit. She would follow Shinichi to his land even if it means that she can never return. Shinichi saw Elbia in his dream trying to kill him, and when he woke up, Elbia was sitting on him, growling. Shinichi screams his lung out, waking Miyusel and Minori, but it turns out that Elbia was just licking Shinichi because of her beastly instincts. She can't control her animal instincts whenever it is a full moon, and all her odd behavior was because of that too. Shinichi apologizes to her for thinking so wrongly about her, and once again compliments her fluffy tail and ears, making her jump over him in joy. The conflicts regarding preferences are slowly getting out of hand, and Shinichi is quite unsure about how to resolve them. For now, they are only educating 25 students, but in the future, this number will gradually increase and could lead to bigger problems, and for that, they will need more teachers. So Shinichi proposes to add Miyusel to the team since her Japanese language skills are far better than the others. Some packages with several essential supplies are sent to the mansion, so Shinichi allows Elbia to help around unpack them. While doing so, Shinichi finds a golden ball that belongs to some famous player that Minori likes, but seeing the ball, Elbia loses control and starts to play with it. Things get a little out of hand, trying to take the ball back, but nothing serious happens, and in the end, Minori hands the ball to Elbia since it's already ruined anyways. At that moment, an idea hits Shinichi. He proposes that they arrange a soccer match between dwarfs and elves so they can let out some steam while playing a friendly match, but little did he know what could go wrong. The proposal is approved and the announcement for the event is done. All the students are excited to participate and win the prize. The playing field is set and all the players are ready to roll. At the beginning of the match, the dwarves take the upper hand because of their extraordinary physical strength. The cute little dwarf girl Romilda overpowers all the elves on the opposite team with her forced attacks. The first half of the match went by with dwarves on top. Minori is fired up and demands to let their elves use their magic. The dwarves agree, and so the results of the next match will be off the walls. Elves started to use their magic to defend the goal and even came up with a combination of attacks to score a goal. The fire on both ends keeps increasing so much that a friendly match turns into a full-fledged war. Shinichi is now regretting his decision. He never meant for this to happen, but apparently this is the reality of things. Sport is not just a friendly game, but a silent fight between two nations, if you look at it from that perspective. When the so-called match reached its end, Elbia jumps in and takes the ball. Following her, Petralka also jumps in to score a goal. While running towards the goal, she asks Miusel to assist her with her magic and kicks a clumsy goal. Everyone sees the Empress collaborating with the half-elf and giving her a high five to celebrate, which leaves quite an unexpected yet positive impression on everyone watching. And that would be it from our side for today. If you enjoyed this unusual journey into a foreign land as much as we did, leave us a like and subscribe to our channel to stay up to date for more. Peace!